Welcome back to the Speakeasy podcast, where we have hard and honest conversations, which is exactly what we're going to do today. I have Susan Peters with me. She is the CEO of Unbound Now, which is an organization on the front lines of the fight against human and sex trafficking. And obviously, I want to be upfront. This is a heavy topic. But obviously, I believe that the uncomfortable conversations are the most important ones. We were very intentional throughout our conversation to not be gratuitous or unnecessarily graphic. But I do think that this conversation could change the way that you see your neighborhood, your community, and your role in protecting the most vulnerable among us. And I am so thankful to have Susan here on the show. I have an intimate connection to Unbound Now. I really love some of the people that are involved, and we have personally been partners with this organization for 2 years now, and it is such a gift to get to have her on and talk about something that really matters in general, but has been something that I've been passionate about since I was in college. And so I wanted to give you the heads up that, yeah, we're talking about something heavy, but I hope that you listen. I hope that you learn something and that you walk away with value for yourself and your family and also for your community around us. So let's get into it. Susan, welcome to the Speakeasy.
Oh, thanks for having me.
This is actually such a delight because we got to meet in person briefly. There was a lot of demand for your attention. But we have an interesting connection in this work that my childhood best friend's sister-in-law runs one of your organizations here local to me in Baton Rouge. And yeah. I think that connection just makes it a little bit cooler. I adore Holly.
Oh, yeah.
But we have gotten to go to the gala for Unbound, which is the organization that you are at the head of, for 2 years. I think this is the second year of it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And we are huge supporters. I actually worked with Tigers Against Trafficking back in college, and so this has kind of been a necessary pain point that I've leaned into for years. And so today on the show, we're going to talk about trafficking and what it is and what it isn't. Because I think this is a conversation that needs to be had kind of like a little bit of a reality check of what's actually happening. But before we jump into that, I personally, I would love to get to know more of you and your story and how do you end up doing this work, especially at the scale that you're doing it at?
Yeah, I did not set out to run an anti-human trafficking organization. But what happened was I was on staff at my church many years ago, and part of my job was traveling internationally, visiting missionaries all over the world. And 15 years ago plus, every time I went to a country, came face to face with human trafficking. So literally went to Uganda, met child soldiers. They were just young boys playing in their villages, and they were kidnapped by the LRA and forced to be child soldiers, which is a form of human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And I just remember before I went in to meet them, just thinking, who's going to help them heal? This is a long game of getting them reconnected to counseling and jobs and support systems. And then I went to Cambodia, I went to Thailand, I went to Dominican Republic. It really didn't matter where I went. I kept seeing trafficking. So finally in 2012, which is when we started Unbound Now, I just thought someone can do my job, but there's not enough of us fighting human trafficking. And I thought it would be international because that's what we all thought. Yeah. It's happening over there. That's what I saw. And then I met my first 14-year-old American kid. And her and these young girls were recovered by law enforcement out of an apartment complex in my community. And when I went and met with her, and she told me this horrific story, how they had not been in school in almost a year. They were brutalized day and night. And then she looked at me and she said, well, we didn't think anyone cared this was happening to me. And I have never forgotten it 15 years later. And I was like, we care. We just didn't know.
Right.
And so I immediately, at that time, we only had volunteers, said, we've got to start looking and researching what's happening domestically, what's happening in our own cities, our own states in the U.S. with trafficking of our own American children.
Yeah.
And so we pivoted immediately, and that's what we focused on. And you mentioned Louisiana. So we've been operating 15 years across Texas. We just started in Louisiana about 3 years ago. And it's been incredible the numbers of children and youth our teams have served. Texas, we had a slow, you know, raise,
Mhm.
but in Louisiana, we hit the ground and our teams are full up. There's just a lot of work to be done.
There is. Louisiana is a hot spot, and that sounds what? Like a little
Yeah,
down home, Louisiana, what? But first, I mean, we are very high in crime in general. And then also we have such a with that port spot that people can come in and out of as much as they want. And I remember the first gala that we went to last year for Unbound, and we had been like Holly and I met before she even took over just to kind of connect about, yeah, like we're in with support and like financially and, emotionally, however we can help. But then sitting in that gala and hearing some of the just Louisiana specific statistics,
yeah,
and I think I remember being like in tears because
yeah,
what you said about that first girl that you met of we didn't think anybody cared and it's no, we didn't know.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
guarantee you, this is not just Louisiana. It's not just Texas. It's
Right,
not just Chicago or LA. Like this is happening
right,
everywhere.
right.
And so let's talk a little bit really quick about what Unbound Now does
Yeah,
because it's so beautiful. It's such a necessary piece of the puzzle because yes, law enforcement can go in and they can rescue these girls, boys, women,
right,
whoever it is,
right.
but it is a bit of a like then what? Cuz they need
Yeah,
to turn around and go get the next ones and the next
right,
ones. They're
right,
not necessarily equipped to do what you were
right.
saying you immediately had the eyes to see of like this is the long game.
Right, right. Well, the unfortunate thing is number one, trafficking victims, youth victims are not identified for 2 years
Mhm.
statistically. So these are young people that are in our communities, in our schools, going through the convenience stores and at the bus stops that we're seeing that are not being identified as trafficking victims. And so we very much focus on identifying these victims in our communities and then participating with law enforcement on recoveries. Many of our law enforcement partners will say we won't go on an operation recovery without Unbound Now
Mm.
because victims are trained not to tell police anything.
Yeah.
They won't tell them their name, how old they are, what the story is. But we can come in and say, I'm not law enforcement. I'm not child protective services. I'm here just to support you and help you get the resources you need and walk alongside you. And we will be there in that emergency recovery, but then we will do case management where we see them every week. We're getting them connected to counseling, connected to an education program that'll work, or job readiness, or safe housing, all those things that are so necessary. Because when you're in trauma, you aren't understanding what the legal ramifications are, or the medical options are, or the social services. And so our team of full-time staff, we call advocates, walk alongside those survivors to help them do that. And so we like to say that we identify, we recover, and we restore lives
Mm.
that have been impacted by human trafficking.
During Holly's speech at the gala this year, it kind of makes me emotional, but she gave like a run through of a day at
Yeah,
Unbound Now. And I wish that I had a recording of it and I could play it because I mean, started at 6 a.m. and I think she ended at like 2 a.m.
yeah,
And it was showing up at a rescue, showing up at a police station, showing up at a hospital, grabbing go bags. I mean, it was all day.
yeah,
There was something to be done, a need to be met, and
yeah.
Unbound Now is doing that and meeting those needs, these tangible
Right.
needs. And the speaker, I cannot remember her name.
Tony
This
McClinley. She's a
Yes.
survivor, licensed professional counselor, and a good friend to ours. Yeah.
Yes, she made this really clear distinction that I think is important, that so many people picture trafficking like the movie Taken, right? It's
Right.
a stranger, a van, a foreign
Right.
country. and she very explicitly laid out that is not uh,
Right.
not often
Right.
the case.
Right.
And so let's define our terms a little bit. Like what is this looking like? I know
Yeah.
that it's a wide spectrum,
Sure.
but there are some defining characteristics of what trafficking is looking like domestically right now.
Right. I think, like you mentioned, the movie Taken, people, a lot of times they think that's all it is. It's a
Mhm.
kidnapping, it's international. That rarely happens. It does happen, but
Yeah.
rarely. So we
Yeah.
served over 2,000 victims last year, and I don't even know if we had a kidnapping case. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not what we see very often. What happens are most traffickers are known by the victims,
Yeah.
or they get into their life pretty quickly through social media or meeting them in some place. And then they attach to them. They're incredibly skilled at manipulation. They identify what that victim's weaknesses or vulnerabilities are, and then they befriend them and they rope them into a relationship, and then they get them away from their normal support system. And so it's a lot of coercement away from their surroundings. So you might see a kid who's, playing on the softball team, is a good student, has had her same circle of friends for a number of years, but someone reaches out to her on Facebook or on Instagram and is like, "You're so pretty. I was looking at your pictures. Have you thought about modeling?" What 14-year-old doesn't go, "Oh,
Mhm.
and they're so smooth that they keep talking to them. And then they'll say, "Go over to this site for us to talk more privately." And I mean, within 2 weeks, they have a loyalty connected with that perpetrator more than they do their even friends and family. They are so manipulating these individuals. And then they'll convince them to meet them, sneak out with them. They'll introduce drugs or alcohol and that kind of thing. And then before you know it, they're caught up in this life. And so it's out of that relationship building of people many times that they know. Unfortunately, there's family members, there's neighbors, there's coaches, there's teachers. It just, unfortunately, there's people who take advantage of others for their own profit,
Mhm.
all around us. And so old school was like, what does the pimp look like? He's got a hat and a fur coat and a cane. And it's like, now it could be a teacher, it could be a coach, it could be a businessman, it could be your neighbor, it could be your uncle. And so you just don't know who it is.
And that is, when you said the next thing you know, they're caught up in this life. The next thing you know, these girls are being sold for sex.
Right.
That's what's happening. They're
Right. And
not
they're still
just
going home. They're still going to school. They're still, showing up to church youth services.
yeah.
I mean, all of our kids, have done that. But most of them will say, if I had a safe adult that said, "It looks like something's going on with you," or "You feel, look sad. If you ever want to talk, you can come talk to me." Or you see someone who all of a sudden starting to dress promiscuously, or they're, you hear about posts that they're making, and you just are like, "That's a bad kid." It's like, what's going
Mm.
on that is exploiting this kid in that direction? And can we intervene? That's what's important. I had a friend who, he's a judge in Colorado, and he was trafficked as a child by his own father. His father was a pedophile and traded him for other children. And he said, "I am convinced that if a teacher, a counselor, one of my friends' parents would have said, 'If you ever want to talk, if anything's going on, I'm here,'" he said, "I
Mhm.
would have made an outcry."
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's true. We're seeing more and more, we're seeing trafficking increase, and we're seeing that quote unquote like bad kid label go with it. And it's a
Right.
correlation that I don't think a lot of people are making
Right.
because there's so much. Susan,
Yeah.
there's so many factors. Anyway,
Right.
my parents all the time are like, you are parenting in a completely different world than
Right.
we did,
Right.
30 something years ago. And
Right.
so I think it's a case for compassion and
Right.
for curiosity, right?
Right.
And that we can slap a label on kids. And
Right.
I would venture to say that, as a side note, even the kids that aren't being explicitly trafficked, the kids that you're seeing get that bad kid label, like the question always stands, what's going on?
Right.
Right? Like
Right.
what's going on at home? What's going on in your online life? You mentioned social media. I've had quite a few guests on the show. People that listen know I have a pretty explicit stance on social media for kids, which is no. Like
Yeah.
just a hard pass. I am always of the mindset that at 37 I struggle to regulate and work in social media healthily, and my prefrontal cortex is fully formed. These kids are being just a barrage, and they can
Right.
even be groomed by the internet, not even by an individual. They can be groomed by the internet for a while with
Right.
sexuality and what they're into and what's appropriate, and then they are primed for someone to step in and
Right.
take advantage of that.
Right.
How often are the rescues and restorations that y'all are doing linked to social media right now?
Oh, almost every time. I like to tell parents, if a 40-year-old man knocked on your door and said, I'd like to talk to your
Mm.
14-year-old in her bedroom, you'd want to like, where's the bat? I'm going to take it after this
Right.
guy.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening with our devices, that we're allowing kids, innocently. Number one, the pornography is so prevalent. I mean, I was sitting with my daughter on my lap many years ago, and we were looking up something to do a research project, and pornography popped up
Yeah.
on and I'm like, it is so easy to
And you
accidentally
were right
follow that.
there.
Yes. And it has so many addictive components to it, and that leads to secrecy. And then they get a mindset that I can't talk to my parents about what's going on, and that can wear them down. They are groomed by peers to send inappropriate pictures, and then they
Mhm.
feel trapped. So it's very difficult, and you mentioned that, to date a parent, because you have to have those super uncomfortable conversations,
Yep.
and we have to figure out a way for kids to feel safe to communicate failure, and that's really the only safeguard. And then to have really high standards when it comes to social media, that they're private, that we know what you are on, that we check it and help monitor it. Just like, and you've heard it said, I know, but you've got to have a parent's consent for alcohol or to drive a
Right.
car, or, we need to do that with our devices, because these perpetrators are incredibly, incredibly able to manipulate really great, smart kids. Now, I will say most of those that we serve are coming from very difficult family backgrounds
Right.
that are much more vulnerable, much more easy, unfortunately, for the perpetrators to go after, because they don't have someone fighting for them and protecting them. And so that is the majority of what we're seeing. Kids that are involved in the foster care system or the judicial system is disproportionately, represented in those that we serve. So intact families that are involved, um, fathers, big brothers, participating in activities, having hard conversations goes a long way for the
Yeah.
health of our families, and being protectors of other kids in the community, I think is really, really smart. But still, being smart on social media is the biggest safeguard for protecting young people.
Yeah, I think even with an intact family, I think we can all afford to be a little psycho about devices and social media. And
Yeah.
because actually we're having this conversation with a couple that we're friends with they have older kids a little bit than ours, and they're doing the like, I don't know, what do we do, like back and forth. And my husband and I are pretty hardliners about it. And to be fair, I mean, my oldest is almost 12. But I mean, she has friends that have social media. It's a conversation that we're having to have now. And so their kids are older, and I just made one statement. I was like, why leave the door open?
Mhm.
Like, why wait for something to happen? And it was both of their faces just kind of, oh. And the husband looked at his wife and was like, why are we waiting? We're just like opening the door for something bad to happen. Like,
Yeah.
let's like figure this out. And so I
Yeah.
think it is comforting for sure to know
Yeah.
that fathers matter, big brothers matter, having hard conversations matter. But I
Yeah.
don't think there's any need to leave them susceptible. But for the more susceptible demographic, is there a specific age group that you're
Yeah,
seeing?
I mean, unfortunately, we see younger and younger victims. All of our teams have younger boys and girls on our caseloads. But I would say the majority is between 14, 15, and, you know, we only serve up to 18 in Louisiana right now. But most of our other places we can serve up to 22.
Hmm.
And so that, the grooming a lot of times happens in that middle school, junior high age, the exploitation, any of those times, but particularly, 15 to 20. Those are vulnerable times. Sometimes traffickers will wait until they turn 18 because they're
Hmm.
afraid of those felony charges. But that's a vulnerable time, from 14 to 22,
Yeah.
where someone can take advantage. Everyone's looking for love and belonging and
Yep.
a special person. And, struggles with self-esteem as it's getting established. And unfortunately, perpetrators will take advantage of that. And so I think, anybody who's working in the school system or, big brothers clubs or any kind of any involved in anyone's life, it's, we usually can all of us remember that. Well, I can remember a fifth grade music teacher and him literally taking me out in the hall going, you're a leader and you're going to go off to junior high and you can say no to drugs. I came from a single parent home, alcoholic father, and I attribute the path I took to one 5-minute conversation with a music teacher,
Wow.
because I was one of those vulnerable kids, had been sexually abused as a young person. I mean, the whole thing. And so I think we just don't want to underestimate the power of an adult calling gifts and, positivity and encouragement out to a young person goes a long way, which is what we do at Unbound
Yeah.
Now with our advocacy program.
Yeah.
We intervene in someone, unfortunately, that's been exploited, that's already been trafficked, but we're speaking identity in them.
Yeah.
We're helping them find a successful program for school where they can be supported. And it's amazing how quickly they can recover that education and recover skills and be able to make it. The resiliency is profound. And
It
there's
is.
research that one healthy adult in a traumatized person's life is a game changer. And that's how we built Unbound Now, is having that adult in their life. And then we keep introducing them to healthier adults and healthier systems so they can build this infrastructure to make it. But it's really amazing. But I would say to any of your listeners, it doesn't matter if you're in the grocery store and you speak something over someone, they'll remember it. When you're a
Yeah.
hurting kid, when maybe at home you're just being told you're worthless, it'll go a long way.
It will. I think it's a good call to action, specifically even for believers, which is a majority of my listenership. I was having, I don't remember if this episode has come out yet, but we were having a conversation about how in our own lanes we all live now. I think it's, it was happening leading up to COVID, but COVID really exacerbated that we all just kind of do our own thing. I am blown away when I go to our little local grocery store and nobody talks to each other. Like the cashier isn't even saying hi. That is creating an environment for these predators to thrive. If we are all just keeping our eyes on our own thing, on our
Right.
own lane, we don't want to bother anybody, we don't
Right.
want to overstep, we're so busy, we're overstimulated, whatever it is, we're missing it. We're missing these really vulnerable people that are right in front of us.
Right.
Can you I know it's can be hard because we don't wanna be gratuitous, but can you give, like, a few examples of what this looks like? Like, maybe a few of the cases that you've
Yeah.
worked where it was happening right in front
Right.
of people?
Yeah. And we like to say awareness saves lives.
Yeah,
When you're aware of the signs of trafficking potentially and the environment and you report it, you can save a life. And we've
yeah.
seen it happen over and over again.
Hey, popping in really quick to remind you that your health insurance doesn't have to suck. Okay, I know there are a lot of families who are self employed or are paying huge premiums every month. This is just a really big conversation that a lot of people are having. And the conversation a lot of time looks like, why am I paying for something I can't actually afford to use? Or why can't I get approval for things that actually make me better or healthy? Which is why I'm so thankful for alternatives like Crowd Health. So with Crowd Health, you pay a monthly fee, and this gives you access to a team of bill negotiators, lower cost prescriptions and testing, vetted doctors lists, and your own dedicated designated care advocate. And then if something big happens, you pay the first $500 and then the rest of the crowd steps in to help you. And I just think that this is how these kinds of things are meant to work. So you can join Crowd Health to get started for $99 for your first 3 months by using the code Speakeasy when you go to joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code Speakeasy. Now remember, Crowd Health is not insurance, but this is how you can opt out of a broken system and take your power back at joincrowdhealth.com.
One that I'm thinking of is someone went through one of our trainings and they were at the gas station and saw a young girl running out of a truck, and they called the police, and the police got there, and then they called me and they said, this kid won't tell us her name, won't tell us how old she is or anything like that. And so we got there and did our thing where we built, trust with her. And she was on the missing and exploited, endangered runaway status with NCMEC, and found out she was a varsity swimmer as a freshman in another city. And this trafficker had built a relationship with her, and then had he was transporting her to Florida, and this was in Texas. And so thank God that person called and said, this
Yeah.
doesn't look right.
Yeah. It just
And
doesn't
they
look
could have
right.
said, maybe she's in a fight with her dad or stepdad. I know I don't need to get involved, but he just went, it doesn't look right. Let's let
Yeah.
police check it out.
Yeah.
Had another one where a young little girl was sitting on the curb at a Starbucks, and someone was like, that doesn't look right. And the parent-ish person was like in the car, and it just was weird. She called the police, and sure enough, they were advertising that young person, and they were able to recover her. And so opening our eyes, reporting things, let the law enforcement investigate, can really make a difference. And now you're hearing more and more people are devising systems where, the flight attendants are having their eyes open and they've seen people be recovered. We've seen coffee shops, say, take this lid off if you're in danger. And,
Mhm.
and so I think more and more people are paying attention and taking it as a responsibility. I'm at least going to call law enforcement. I'm at least going to see what kind of car they drove off in and report this. And when you see someone that you just don't feel like belongs together,
Yeah.
and you don't, people are first, they're like, I don't want to be judgmental, but it's like, well, use your common sense.
Yeah. Use
Does
your
it
discernment.
use your discernment? And if it's like, this doesn't, something in your stomach is going, I don't like this. What's the harm in reporting it? Let police come out and check it out.
Yeah.
I don't tell people to intervene. We don't, as a team, we don't intervene. We call law enforcement and let them do their job, and we stay safe. But we can collect information. What do
Yeah.
they look like? What is their car? What is their license? What was the situation? And it does save lives. When if you're a parent or a teacher or you run a dance studio, and all of a sudden this kid is radically changing their behavior and their participation and that kind of thing, I would just say, ask some questions, see if they're okay, because they probably will make an outcry. Research shows that like 98% of children are telling the truth when they make an outcry about sexual abuse.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yeah.
people are like, well, kids lie. They don't lie about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so believe them and
Right.
report it. If your child gets pulled into, hey, send this inappropriate picture, don't be angry at them, even though it scares the bejeebies out of you. And our reaction to fear is anger sometimes. But you just have to understand how good people are at manipulating others.
And they're
And the
so
good,
young.
yeah,
I mean, I could be manipulated by a very smart person at
yeah,
37. Like I know that for a fact,
yeah.
and I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like we're handing children devices and expecting them to be able to handle them like adults, where a lot of adults can't handle them. Like, of course, these children are being manipulated and coerced and controlled. There's the fact that we even have to say that,
Right.
give that
Well, think of the
qualifier.
older people that are getting manipulated by scammers out of their
Oh
money.
my gosh.
So reverse that to a young person between the ages of 12 and 20 who are learning how to navigate this world and relationships and my self-esteem and what I want to do and my parents and divorce and finances, and then someone comes in that's really smooth saying, I'll take care of you, I will love you, you can belong. That's very vulnerable for
It
almost
is.
anyone.
It is. And we've said this a few times, but it's happening in our communities,
Yeah.
I guess on varying levels and in varying scales, but It is all around you. And I would encourage people to like look into what this looks like in your community.
Mhm.
Unbound Now may not be where you are, but a lot of the time there's something, or there's data, or you're seeing people get arrested, and then
Right.
they may not have the necessary care team like what you guys are providing, but knowing what you're looking for, which I love that you're just like trust your discernment. Because truly, okay, you call the cops on someone and it's not trafficking. Okay,
Mhm.
it was uncomfortable for that person, and that's unfortunate, but the other option is we turn a blind eye to
Mhm.
a very real epidemic happening in our country. I would rather err on the side of hurting somebody's feelings or making them uncomfortable rather than something horrific continuing, and I clocked it,
Mhm.
but I didn't do anything.
Yeah, and a lot of times, let's say law enforcement's called out and it is a trafficking situation, but they cannot have a legal recourse. They're smooth enough to get away with it. The engagement law enforcement, if they'll have a positive engagement with that person, that can give them the courage when they have the
Mhm.
opportunity to make an outcry. Same thing with a clinician, in a hospital setting, emergency room, some kind of medical community. I mean, it's very high percent, like 88% of our victims go through medical communities and are not identified.
Right.
And so we need to be looking out for that. If someone's speaking for them, holding all their documents, they're not able to answer questions on their own, they can't give where they are, what their address is, things like that, then that's, separate them from that caregiver. Tell them you have to do some kind of personal exam and say, are you in danger? Do you need help? And a lot of times they won't make the outcry then because they're
Mhm.
too afraid of the trafficker. But if you can give them a card, or you can say, this is a safe place if you ever need help, they'll come back. And that happens over and over again as well.
Yeah. There is a lot of opportunity to step into this. What does Unbound Now, like what is working with Unbound Now as just an everyday person look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah. I mean, our advocates are working 24/7, like you mentioned. So we
Yeah.
are on call responding constantly. And so we really rely on the support of our communities in many ways. If you just think about a trafficking victim, many times they're away from home, they don't have resources, all those kinds of things. So anything from, you know, clothes are given to us and shoes, we have to show up. They don't have anything usually.
Yeah.
You mentioned the go bags. When we show up, we have a bag, and many times volunteers will put those together so that we show up with toiletries and snacks and try to get them hydrated, yoga pants, t-shirt, things like that. And so putting those kind of things together, going on our website, unboundnow.org, go into resources, and you can watch short videos to be educated on this, because you might be called to work, go to be jury duty. And you see
Mhm.
a trafficker come up all buttoned up and he looks like a businessman, and all that. And you see the trafficking victim who has been through a lot of trauma and drug addiction because of her perpetrator. Her story may not be as orderly because of trauma. If you're not educated on, oh, that's what this looks like, this guy is still the bad guy, then we lose these cases because we're not educated as a community. So being educated really goes a long way. And then I mentioned some of the ways that we interface with young people, whether they're family members, they're your kids' sporting events, church, all those kinds of things. Unfortunately, there is probably, if you're in larger settings of young people, there's someone in there that's
Mm.
probably being abused. So
Yeah.
having your eyes open, being a safe adult, for them to be able to make an outcry, speaking incredible things over their life so that one day they can believe that about themselves, goes a long, long way. And so there's just lots of ways. Of course, we're a nonprofit. We have our teams out there by people giving to us financially. And so that's, of course, important to our work. And
Yeah.
we're so thankful God has provided. But every year, we're having to raise those funds. But it's just so important because we need to be out there 24/7. When law enforcement pulls over a car at 2 in the morning, they don't know where to take them. When Child Protective Services recovers a young person, a lot of times they don't have a placement. And those are things that we can do. When district attorney is doing a prosecution, we can sit with that
Mm.
young person and bring them food and support them during trial. I mean, there's so many ways that we show up in that way, and having volunteers support us. Like you said, come to the gala, learn more, find ways to support us is a tremendous way. So we're very thankful for the community. Also, talking to people like the district attorney's office, law enforcement, sheriffs, letting them know, hey, what are we doing as a community about human trafficking? What are you seeing? And letting that, because they respond by people's interest and concerns.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, our people seem to be concerned about the young people being sold in our community.
Yeah.
And then supporting when people are arrested for buying young people for sex and being held accountable. We need to educate ourselves. It's maddening for someone in my position when someone will say it's two consenting adults. I'm like, no, 98% of those are run by a pimp.
Right.
Those girls are destroying their body, mind, and spirit and get no money except getting destroyed. And
And
so
there's no
being
consent.
educated on it. Yeah, there's no consent. And for a child, 18 and under, you don't have to have um, force, fraud, or coercion is what we say as an adult that you have to prove trafficking. But if you're in the commercial sex industry, 18 or under, you do not have to prove that they are a trafficking victim. So there's no such thing as a child prostitute.
Amen. Amen to that. That's an insane. Those are two insane words to put together for sure. Because,
Yeah,
like you made the point earlier, children can't buy cigarettes. They can't buy alcohol. They can barely go to the movies by themselves. But we
right,
think that we have seen the like adultification of children over time, and the pretzels that people kind of bend themselves into to make themselves feel better about the state of things. And it's like, no, it's much better if we just go ahead and call all of this what it is, which is
right,
trafficking and prostitution, and all of those things is not the same. It's
right.
not even remotely. And that's it, a larger conversation. You can get into the adult side of it and say that a majority of that we're it is not consensual, that these women don't have choices, that they
Right,
are, a lot of them are in positions where they have no voice.
right. And
But if we
most of
can,
them were being exploited as a youth. If you ask them,
exactly,
when did this start? Oh, my mom sold me when I was 16. You
exactly. That's what I
know,
was going to say. If we can get
yeah,
to them when they're kids,
right.
that we can give them a shot. What are some of the success stories that you're
Oh,
seeing come
so
out?
many,
I know
so
there's got to be
many.
so many.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking because you're in Louisiana, we had a young person make an outcry at about 16, and it was a family member that was trafficking her. And she was a straight A student in AP courses and on the dance team. Phenomenal, brilliant young woman. And she made an outcry because she didn't want her sisters being trafficked. And I was like, we got to get this kid in college. I was calling every
Yeah.
donor I knew because I'm like, this kid is phenomenal and just doing terrific. I mean, we have so many
Yeah.
that we've got some on our staff. I've got a gal who finished her master's in social work. Just tremendous, from needing a GED all the way up. And it's just amazing what people can do when someone believes in them,
Yep.
helps support them, and helps encourage them along the way. It's not linear. It's not like,
No.
it's
Right.
usually like this, but our team is there to support in the highs and the lows, even relapse. And
Mm.
then we pick them up right when they re-engage and then keep working from there. And most people, if you know about addiction, it's kind of in circles, and with trauma, it can be the same, but it's phenomenal to see how resilient God has built us, and
Yes.
with support and belief, and I do. I mean, I'll call supporters. I'm like, I need a computer for this kid.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had
Yeah.
cars given so they can get to work, and I mean, it's just been amazing. Today someone was asking about an apartment getting furnished, and it's just a big day when you move someone that's been through that into their own place. And so there's lots of ways for people to get involved to support a survivor, and they've so many of them have just recovered their life, and we have had some that it's turned out tragically, and people are like, how do you keep doing this after 15 years, when a few cases happen like that. But I'm like, but we were there. They
Hmm.
weren't alone.
Hmm.
We were there, and we said there are people like us, and when you're ready, there are people that are willing to help you in communities. And so that we may not know the end of their story, they may have disappeared from our services or where we know them, but they know, you mentioned Tony McKinley, the speaker last year, and she's a good friend. And she so encouraged me because she was trafficked as a child. And she said, I was in like 3 or 4 safe houses. I never made it through a program. She runs 2 adult homes now,
Wow.
and she's written several books. She's phenomenal. And so, healing isn't just a quick fix,
Mm.
but she said every placement, every engagement I had was building something into me until it built to where I could recover. And she's
Yeah.
so healthy now. And so just love those that we get to serve and seeing them. We had one that was a pretty tragic case. We got called out to the hospital, and she couldn't walk at first, and then she was on a walker, and then she was on crutches, and now she's working out and she's doing
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
And so that's just a physical thing of what can happen mentally, emotionally,
Yeah.
spiritually for someone to get their life back. God has made us in a way that we can transform and heal, and we get to see it every day.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that I have a lot on my platforms just about healing in general and the resiliency that God has built us with, and that I think he really created our bodies to heal, and we think of that in terms of illness, right? Or a hard day, and it's such a good reminder that he really genuinely does make beauty from ashes, that not just in like the kind of cleaned up way that we think of, that he will take the worst situation
No.
and use community, which is what he designed us for. Like all of these things that we have talked about today are so biblical, right? Like, speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the right of all of those who are destitute. It's Proverbs 31. Like, this is what God has called us to. He has called us to have eyes to see and to advocate and to show up for the least of these, so that like God can use us to restore them.
Yeah.
And y'all are doing a truly such a commendable, incredible job, because I think a lot of people don't think beyond the rescue
Yeah.
into the restoration,
Yeah.
and that's where it's all work, right? But that's where the work
Yeah.
really
Yes.
starts, right? Because
Yes.
you can get rescued
Yeah. But
and
if you
drop
don't
right
get the
back into it.
support, if you don't get the support and the connection, because when you're in that kind of trauma,
Mhm.
you can't process, how do I fill out an application?
Right.
How do I find safe housing? How do I find counseling? How do I get there? And that's what our advocates do. We have 125 staff now and
Wow.
$15 million budget, and it's just so important, and we could do so much more. I mean, it's just being there, walking alongside, but seeing people's lives recovered is so worth it.
It is.
And having the drop-in center, having our teams out there, doing the prevention education is just so critical in our communities. And love to have your listeners support us and works like us, because it matters. And we've had adults who were trafficked as children, but they didn't know, they didn't have language for it, and they'll come to a
Yeah.
training and literally go, that's what happened to me. But their mind was so scrambled in their living situation and parenting and the things they couldn't make sense of it. But then once they got the language, and seeing those individuals realize what happened, go into counseling, let God put the pieces together, and then use your voice for others is super powerful. And we see that happen a lot too.
Amen. It is so powerful. Remind people one more time where they can connect with Unbound Now.
Yeah, if you go to our website, unboundnow.org, there's a lot of resources there. If you go to resources, you can watch the short videos. There's a lot of, there's actually a parenting, how to have tough conversations with your children to protect
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
information as well. Of course, you can give to us, which we always appreciate. So there's a lot of resources there, unboundnow.org.
Awesome. Susan, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and the work that you are doing. My hope is that this doesn't overwhelm people. It gives them information and resources and eyes to see, and a direction to head, because this is really necessary. This is happening all around us. And if you can just know what you're looking for and how you
Right.
can help, I think we can all come together and hopefully put a real dent in this.
That's right. That's right. When everybody does something, then it really makes a difference. And so Thank you so much for having me. Love talking about this, and I'm so proud of our team. So love to share their stories.